Hello, everyone. We are here to read and respond to the. Let's see. This is the 89th podcast.
Wow.
Yeah, we're going to be coming up on 100 here in a few months, and we've got some. We're going to start planning out some prizes for you guys who have managed to stick around for so long.
Nice.
So look forward to that as time comes closer. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and address the reviews that have been left by you guys concerning basically Kurai losing his mind. All right, I think we start with Atomical, yes?
Yeah, all right. Atomical. What the hell? Man, I thought I was in for some hurt/discomfort, but I was just hit by all the hurt. 0% comfort.
Not discomfort, just comfort. Like mix of hurt and comfort, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Still, I find this absolutely amazing. There are some analog horror themes in this which strike me as positively fascinating, such as the hallucinations manifesting as tangible beings, or at least that's how I interpreted it. Either way, sir, you have my attention. I am invested.
Yes!
Yours, the girl that likes to scare themselves with horror.
I mean, that's interesting that so I'm getting that she likes the horror theme.
Yeah.
I've never seen a horror movie in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it's more like psychological thriller than anything, but even so.
those are pretty horrific, as I understand it sometimes.
Sometimes.
But yeah, anybody who's been following me knows I don't do horror. But hey, I guess I'm expanding my genre a little bit, I guess.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you, Atomical.
Thank you for your review.
Now, guest. You know, the way that Kai is haunting Kurai reminds me of a darker version of The Lion King, where Mufasa is telling Simba, remember who you are. In fact, it's replaying in my head on loop.
Thanks for making The Lion King creepy.
Thank you, guest. All right, Ethan Chironis.
He's been one of the regulars. He fell out of contact with the story for a while, but he messaged me. He said he's planning on.
Yay!
It seems like he's gonna be around for a bit.
Nice. Glad you're back.
Glad you're back.
All
mate.
right. Wish you the best with whatever you prefer to call it. I don't know. I don't want to offer unwanted pity or refer to it in a way that offends you.
I'm doing good.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's pretty hard to offend us, so don't worry. Sorry I dropped out of contact with this story. My interest in my hero varies, and this story is also dark enough that it is not always for me.
Okay.
But at this point, you've pretty much outdone Gurren Lagann, which is much over 9,000.
All right.
I can't remember if you've revealed the second user's quirk yet. Here.
I haven't. I have not. The second user's quirk has not come up. The third user's quirk hasn't even come up yet. They don't know what that is. I think Akudori has some idea of what the third's quirk might be, but he hasn't been able to cement it. So yeah, no, I haven't. I know what it is. I know what what the second quirk is. But to avoid spoilers for people who are just following the anime instead of the manga, I'm gonna refrain from divulging that here. But I do know what it is. I do have a plan for it. I think it's gonna be kind of cool.
Nice. All right. Thank you, Ethan Coronas. Glad you're back.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
All right. Joe Clone. Well, then, this is concerning. At least Kurai told Mina what he saw. That's all I could ask for from him right now if I had my friend go through this.
Yeah, you got to talk about stuff when you're in this situation. Otherwise, a doctor can't help you unless you tell them what's wrong.
Well, Mina's not exactly a doctor.
No. But a lot of people become unhealthy, and then they become more unhealthy because they refuse that something's wrong with them, or they just try to brush off the symptoms or whatever, and then the doctors are kind of left at a loss because they didn't have all the relevant information. Obviously, I'm not saying Mina is a doctor, but it is an important step in being able to talk to somebody about it.
Okay. All right. But All Might getting in trouble? Oh, yikes. I suppose he isn't immune to this. And Kai being able to fight against Kurai? I have a feeling I know how this was done. I'll save it until it's properly explained.
All right. I'm interested to see what he thinks it is. He might be right. But yeah, that's gonna be
And suddenly we're in caps. Ozpin? Holy cow, Salem actually exists here?
Yep.
Juniper is coming?
Yep.
Hype train is rolling, boys. Whoop whoop.
All right, somebody's excited for that.
I'm glad he's excited. All right, thank you, Joe Clown.
Thank you for your review. Yes, as always.
All right.
And then
we're moving on to
your favorite.
Silly Kita.
Yeah.
Wow, this has turned into a difficult situation. I think that the next part of the story is going to be a truly interesting one, as it will give us insight into a well-explored character in a way that I have actually not seen to date. How will Kurai handle things when he has no choice but to be away from his entire support group? I mean, I know he kind of tried to shut himself away a little after he lost his arm, but Mina and the others were able to get through to him. Now, though, he's going to be undercover, which means even if he can have contact with his support group / family, it's going to be really limited, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Thus brings us to this new angle from which we can observe this character, which we've always seen has undergone some pretty major changes.
That's an interesting point that they bring up, because Kurai has most certainly felt isolated in a mental sense, but he brings up an interesting point. This is going to be the first time we're going to see Kurai like more or less on his own. Like, yeah, he's gonna have a support group. It's just not going to be the one that he's been familiar with.
Yeah.
He's going to have he's going to have doctors and orderlies and nurses. That's going to be helpful, and that's going to be good. He should be getting that help. But it is going to be a different circumstance than to being around your loved ones.
All right. Sorry, gotta find my spot. All this to say that despite this story having brought out a well-plotted character development into what some might call a full circle, these circumstances are sure to reveal something fresh and new all the same.
Yeah, I remember. I think it might have been Silver who mentioned that he felt like Kurai's character arc had been completed, and that was one of the issues he took with Kurai coming back.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, in a sense, I would say that Kurai's character his character arc had been fulfilled, but I saw that there was more to that could be more to his story, and I wanted to explore that.
Okay.
So, here we are.
Right. Oh yeah. We got Team Juniper coming for reinforcement against the Paranormal Liberation Front? Legas. Might we see a certain witch show up for the final showdown with All for One and all of them when the time comes? Let's go.
I mean, who knows?
We'll see.
Who knows? Maybe, maybe not.
I think that this might be the shortest review I've ever done. I agree, sir. But I don't really know what else I can say at this point. It seems as though this chapter is a superb setup for things to come. And while it might not evoke the exact same feeling of intrigue as the story has up till now, I should stress that my curiosity has not decreased, merely shifted into perhaps a sense of mild apprehension. Please don't take that as an insult. I am well enjoying your work, especially given that you continue to surprise me even after years of following these characters and alternate canon that you have established. Okay. Until next chapter, I wish you well and happy writing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank
you, Silly Kita.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, this is definitely something different to what I've done before. Writing troubled characters is nothing new to me, but the way that his situation is going to be handled is a lot more like how my own personal troubles were handled when I was about this age. Circumstances are obviously very different between Kurai and me, but what comes next in the story, especially, is going to be a lot of my personal experience in handling this kind of situation. So
cool.
Yeah. It's gonna be an interesting. I am interested to see what you guys have to say about it, but like this entire story has been written for me. Like I always think that you should write for yourself because if you're not interested in the story, nobody else is going to enjoy it. But, you also do want to write in a way that's going to engage your audience and keep them interested. But I think that in a strange way, this next part that's coming is the most that I've written for myself in a very long time. So,
okay, nice.
Yeah, the next few chapters.
That.
No?
I mean, I guess I can see it. I just hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, it's like I didn't realize that I was. It's one of those things where it's like I didn't realize that I was working through stuff until I was in the middle of it. So, yeah, it's gonna be a lot more me in the next few chapters. But right. I do hope you guys continue to enjoy it regardless.
All right. That being said, let's get on to the chapter.
All right. We'll see you guys in a little bit.
Start to fall as it turns to a pour. We're here again in this storm, but we've been here before. I see the street signs warning, telling me that I have no other place I could go. Feel like I'm stuck in motion, can't find balance, I'm living in a vertigo. Everything is nothing like before. I've tried to hold it together,
broken. Weiss, you know that I've always suspected our father of questionable conduct, but what you're talking about. An older-looking version of Weiss who had sharper features and slightly shorter hair frowned heavily at her younger sister through a computer screen, who was cringing slightly at the other woman's expected reaction. I don't know that I can find it in me to believe there's such a thing. Winter, you know me, Weiss said, making sure to hold her posture and measure her breathing while her sibling kept a critical eye on her. You know the pride I've always taken in our family's accomplishments and how much I've tried to overlook the company's more questionable dealings in an attempt to save face with Father. But after hearing about what he's doing, what he's planning to do, I can't ignore it any longer. I need to take action against him, and I need your help if I'm going to have any chance of success at these changing times. And yet you ask me to believe that same thing without providing the very proof that seems to have you so convinced. Winter replied archly. You've never kept secrets from me before. Why start now when you're asking me to trust you more than ever? Isn't the point of trust somewhat defeated when you demand verification? Her younger sister replied swiftly. Believe me, if I could tell you, I would do so gladly, but some secrets aren't mine to share. Please believe me when I wouldn't ask this of you if I saw any other way. Winter made a face before she muttered, You sound like Ozpin and Crow. Well, Ruby is their star pupil, Weiss replied in kind, trying to keep her old bitterness from resurfacing. Maybe I'm starting to pick up on their bad habits through her. I will freeze hell over myself before I allow such a thing to occur, Winter said sharply. Seeing Weiss's raised eyebrow, she then added, Your bearing has become far more casual than it was when you were at home. I wonder just what kind of influences your new friends are having on you. Perhaps they're helping me to understand that there is more to being a good hero than just one's self-image, Weiss answered. We're getting off topic. Will you help me or not? Winter fell silent and stared hard at her sister through the screen again, her brow furrowed deep with thought. Eventually, she said, The person whom you discovered this deception from. How much do you trust them? With the weight of the literal world, the younger Schnee replied without hesitation. That is what is at stake, Winter. If I were unable to do everything in my power to prevent what is to come, I would never forgive myself or anyone else in our family. Winter leaned back slightly in her chair, now having seen it clear enough that Weiss was deadly serious about the topic at hand. Even leading up to her acceptance at Second Amendment, I have never seen her so driven. She thought before she gave a slow, single nod. Very well, she said somberly. I'll see to it that the arrangements are made, but I will come to Japan after I take care of some business of my own. After all, it would appear rather unsightly if I didn't oversee the results of our joint investment, wouldn't it? Weiss's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she then allowed a little smile to decorate her lips. I'll look forward to your arrival, she said with a slight incline of her head. Thank you, Winter. Of course, sister dear, the elder Schnee replied in kind. I rather think that I'll be staying away from home for some time, too. After all, I can't see Father taking kindly to this development, and I'd rather not deal with him in person when he finds out. With that, the line was cut, and Weiss turned toward her bed, where a somewhat unusual guest was currently sitting. There you have it, she said as Akadori smiled cheerily in response. Within the week, my trust fund will be depleted and the sum of its contents moved into your own bank account in the Caymans. However did you manage to pull off such a feat? Trade secret, the boy winked. How long will it take before the rest of the funds are transferred? That might take longer, given that Winter now has to liquidate all of her shares in Schnee Support Industries, but she'll be expedient with her time, the albino girl answered. She won't drain her new account entirely, but you'll be receiving plenty enough that it shouldn't matter. In the meantime, I'll help you to get your hands on all the prototype schematics. The plan that Akadori had concocted had taken some convincing on his part for Weiss to even consider, but once she had, she decided that it probably was their best course of action, given what they knew would happen to her family's company within the next few years. It involved Weiss transferring everything in her trust fund to a new bank account that Akadori had set up with his personal cybersecurity measures, followed by the sum of Winter's liquidated assets and some of her own money. This was all in aid of crippling Schnee Industries' finances, however small the measure might be in the long run, as well as funding Akadori's research into developing better equipment for the heroes in training at UA, as well as enhancing the school's defense itself. They would have also liquidated Weiss's company shares, but because she was underage, she had no legal access to them just yet. While this had not been the answer that Akadori was hoping for, he knew that by the time she was able to put claims on those shares, it would be too late to do anything with them. We'd better try to coincide those transfers within a few hours of each other, or your father will take extra measures to lock you and your sister out, Akadori said, his expression sobering up as he started to think over his next few moves in advance. Priority should be placed on the money-changing hand because, while breaking into an improved virtual vault sounds like fun, I'd rather use the extra hours I can save by getting to work with the stuff I'm going to take anyway. You're sure you can pull all this off without any concrete evidence being tied to my sister and I? Weiss asked him dubiously. He was very confident. A little too confident for her liking. On the 4% chance that I somehow slip up in erasing my tracks, I'll be in their systems long enough to dig up every dirty little secret they've ever tried to hide, the young boy said, his smile changing from confident to slightly sinister. If it comes down to it, I'll resort to blackmail. Hardly original, but I'm sure your father has more than a few skeletons he'd prefer to remain in the closet. You're technically talking about corporate espionage, Weiss muttered. When all is said and done, you could be arrested for what you're doing. Yeah, Akadori snorted as he held up his hands, his wrists pressed together. Arrest me then, hero. When all Weiss did was scowl harder at him, Akadori chuckled and stood up from the bed, heading for the doors. He said, there won't be enough evidence to use against me in a court of law, so as long as you and Winter don't throw me under the bus, which I know you won't, we're good. You know that what I'm doing will help the world, and it's not like I'm robbing anyone who doesn't deserve it. You seem to have a much looser moral code than your brother, Weiss muttered as she crossed her arms. How did that ever come about? Kurai seems to have inherited our uncle's sense of justice and honor. Akadori shrugged as he put his hand on the doorknob. Over his shoulder, he then added, I guess I got my parents' willingness to bend the rules from the shadows for the sake of the greater good. The American girl regarded him coolly as he swung the door open before she said, I'll be keeping an eye on you, Hikari. People who believe that their own morals dictate the universal laws of right and wrong are often the ones that end up becoming villains. The moment you forget what the greater good entails, I'll end your machinations, even if it costs me my hero career and reputation to do it. Akadori hesitated in the doorway before he gave her another cheerful smile and the words, I see why Bakugo likes you so much. This was followed by a Weiss turning redder than Kirishima's hair and an icy burst that chased the laughing boy all the way to the elevators. He was still brushing off a few ice flakes from his jacket when he made it to the ground floor, where a familiar entourage was waiting for him. Sorry it took so long, he apologized as he stood in front of the quartet. Suppose I should have accounted for the possibility that Shini's sister could be more stubborn than our resident snow angel. There was a slight growling sound coming from the kitchen, where Bakugo was seen preparing his breakfast. Since his back was turned to them and the noise had been pretty quiet, there was no way to prove that it had come from him. Sorry, was there something you wanted to add, blast him explode? Akadori snickered, which earned him a death glare from the resident explosives expert. Bite me, say a brat, he snarled as he stormed off. Go do your job and get your brother's stupid head out of his ass so nothing's in the way when I kick it. Why do you antagonize him like that? Izuku asked as he looked askance at the younger boy. He's not very big on holding back against people who annoy him. Speaking from personal experience, are we? Akadori replied, his grin still in place. The difference between you and I is that I've managed to turn the whole thing into a game. If he gives in and blasts me, I win. And he knows that. If you're done playing mind games, Mina said a little impatiently, Kurai just got cleared for visitors, and seeing as it's the last day we can visit him before we heroes have to do our work studies, we need to take advantage of all the time we've got. Her boyfriend had been successfully transported to Itamori without incident, where he would be staying for the foreseeable future. He had been settled into his room the previous night, and thanks to a request from Aizawa to the hospital staff as the boy's acting guardian, Kurai's friends would be able to visit him for a little while. The group consisted of Mina, Akadori, Ochako, Izuku, and future Eri, who appeared a little uncomfortable at the thought of seeing what her actions had reduced her old hero to, but because he had requested her presence, she would attend the gathering. Well, everyone's disguises are looking good, so I don't see why we can't head out, Akadori said as he re-examined the group. Unlike when Izuku had snuck into Kamino Ward, Yayorozu was now cleared to use her quirk to lend assistance to other heroes upon request, which Aizawa had done. You can't visit him looking like yourselves, he had deadpanned after giving them the permission to leave campus. We could get away with it if it was just one of you visiting him at a time, but all of you put together will just attract attention. There would hardly be any point in putting him in the hospital under a false identity for his own protection, only to have all of his friends from UA show up and ruin his cover. With that in mind, Akadori had worked with Yayorozu so that her quirk could manufacture some disguises that worked well to hide her friends' true identities. Having been inspired by Izuku's enraged transformation before Christmas, Akadori had set the other boy up with yellow hair dye and purple contact lenses, as well as a dusting of concealer to hide his freckles. After seeing it initially, Yang had laughed and said, "Looking good, bro." After that, the similarities in their appearance forced even the likes of Ida to stifle his laughter as he saw them standing across from each other. His hair had been slicked upward to create a stylish part. Not quite to the degree that he had used in Kamino, but more of his face was showing than normal, and he was wearing custom clothes, including a dark blue vest that Yayorozu had made with his body type in mind. As a result, the average passerby would never relate him to the humble rising star in UA's freshman hero course. Ochako was wearing normal clothes for a winter outing, but with light blue hair and eyes, as well as her usual fringe being drawn back into a braid pattern that Weiss had worked out so that it nearly formed a crown on her head. She also wore a set of half-frame glasses that Izuku thought looked kind of cute. Not that he'd ever admit it out loud. Eri's face had not been leaked to the press yet, but Aizawa had still insisted that she alter her appearance, on the off chance that someone recognized her as a UA student in the future. Earlier in the day, she had rewound several elderly birds and critters from the woods around the school that Koda had brought to her in order to vent some energy, as to make her horn shrink and easier to disguise with her hair. Like Ochako, she had also changed her hair and eyes to a blue color, though hers were a little bit of a darker shade. The two of them would be disguised as sisters, Akuru and Kurai supposed cousins for the trip, and with the implemented cosmetics, they certainly looked the part. Akuru had also applied brown colored eye contacts and dyed his hair to become the same silvery white that now topped his brother's head, which had initially startled the students as they were reminded the two siblings actually used to look very similar, though Akadori was starting to reach his awkward phase, where a person starts to look like they would as an adult, but still with the gangly proportions of a child. Even so, it only made sense that Kurai's family would visit him, so they wouldn't bother to cover that part of his identity, which he would be going by the cover name Taki Kayaba, while Kurai's assumed identity was Madara Kayaba. Upon hearing his chosen name, Ida had rolled his eyes and muttered, "Madara? Really? Did he miss the memo where he's supposed to be subtle?" You'd be surprised at a number of people who have that name. Akadori had shrugged. A lot of Naruto fans out there with unfortunate children. Not all of them are even in Japan. Mina's transformation really took the cake, though. Even her parents would have had a hard time recognizing her from up close if she didn't speak. With Yayorozu Nakadori's help, she had ingested a type of dye that would alter her skin pigmentation overnight, making her wake up with her skin the color of light caramel. Hair dye had been applied by the other girls to make her frizzy mop a dirty blonde color that worked very well with her temporary skin pigmentation. Another pill taken with dinner would serve to change the sclera in her eyes to a normal white shade. Both had caused severe itching for her, so she hadn't gotten all that much sleep, but she had borne the effects for the sake of the transformation without complaint. After all, if there was anyone who was instantly recognizable among their number, it was the girl with the hot pink skin and blackened eyes. Under normal circumstances, the items being used to make the changes would have cost a small fortune, but thanks to Yayorozu's quirk and Akadori's brain power, the group would be able to alter their appearances at no cost to their wallets whatsoever. The last issue for Mina to deal with were her horns, which couldn't change size like Ares did, according to how her quirk was used. With all the other preparations she was going through to alter her appearance, she probably didn't need to alter that final aspect of her person. but she didn't want to risk it. With that in mind, she had shown up at Blake's room the night before with a request that startled the already confused girl. "You're going to trust me to do this?" she had asked after hearing the pink girl out. "You sure that's such a good idea? If nothing else, Sarah can rewind me if you decide to jack it up on purpose, but you don't strike me as the vindictive type." Mina had replied dryly. "You going to do the job or not?" Blake had sighed and allowed the other girl to access her room. "Come on in," she had said. "I'll do my best, but this will probably take a few minutes to set up so I can get it right without taking off anything extra." The following morning, everyone had been taken aback by just how normal Mina looked, but it was Asui who pointed out the cherry on top. "Where'd your horns go, Ribbit?" she asked while pointing at the tired-looking heroine as she was surrounded by the others, each of them more than a little intrigued by this transformation she had undertaken. "I cut him off," she had shrugged, startling everyone around her at once. "You what? How? Didn't that hurt? Who am I supposed to be horn buddies with now?" She had grinned at Kirishima in response to the last question, along with the words, "They'll grow back eventually. One time when I was a kid, I hit my head falling out of a tree, snapped one of them off, but it grew back within a year. Made for some pretty funny pics while it lasted, though." She didn't mention the fact that it had been one of the more painful events of her childhood, and her head was still throbbing where Blake's katana had slashed them clean off, being careful not to damage any of her altered hair in the process. "That girl really is a ninja," Mina had thought at the time. The spots where the horns had been covered were easily enough with a little styling, and the illusion was complete. Mina Ashido, for all intents and purposes, looked nothing like Ashid Queen. Now the kids all stood outside in the snow by their dorm, ready to go wherever their escort decided to show up. Glancing at Mina out of the corner of his eye, Akaduru then decided to ask, "Does Kurai know you decided to go with that look?" "I think he knows we'll be incognito, but no, I didn't give him any details," she answered as a gray car started to pull up. "Excellent," the younger boy said with a mischievous grin. "I can't wait to see the look of utter bamboozlement on his face when he sees you." "Bamboozlement?" Ochako repeated. "Seems like a weird word choice when you could just say confused." No, trust me." Akadori snickered as the van parked in front of them, leading Izuku to open the back door for his girlfriend, who thanked him. Kurai has a very specific face when he gets bamboozled, as opposed to confused. I don't get to see it very often, and I'm looking forward to the event. "Your brother is in the hospital fighting for his sanity, and you're just cracking jokes about it?" asked Izuku disapprovingly. "It's the perfect time to do so." Akadori shrugged as he, Mina, and Eri sat in the middle row. "You didn't see him holding back when I was in a wheelchair, did you?" "Next stop, Itomori Hospital," said the driver, a young man named Akio, who had apparently graduated UA a few years back as a hero, but had thus far kept his head down in terms of grand theatrics. It was for this reason that Eraser had trusted him with covert ops like the one they were technically running at the moment. "Keep your head down until I say otherwise. No point in disguising yourselves as you're just going to be seen strolling out of UA and straight into a hospital." "How can we be certain we're not being tailed?" Eri asked as they all leaned down in their seats to avoid being seen as the young man started to drive off. "That's what I'm for," the driver said with an easy grin. "I've got a telepathy quirk that I can use to focus on one person at a time to communicate without speaking. I can also use it indiscriminately to pick up on the thoughts of anyone within a mile, which can be kind of distracting, though it's easier for me to hear dark thoughts, since they tend to be more intense than normal thought patterns of the average citizen that passes me by. If someone's focusing on me with the intent to harm, I'll pick up on it, and we can take the proper countermeasures." "Which would be?" Mina asked. "Luring our potential friend into a trap, kicking the crap out of him before we hand him off to the police for interrogation," Akio replied cheerfully. Having sensed some of the students' startled reactions, he grinned again and said, "Yeah, my ideas for how to deal with villains don't exactly line up with a lot of UA alumni, but I do what I can to get the job done. I don't judge people for being soft on the bad guys, though. Everyone's got a different way of being their hero, you know?" The car ride to the hospital took nearly an hour, but Akio was surprisingly chatty for someone who had been called on by Aizawa, which made the time go by a little faster. Under normal circumstances, Mina would have been the most talkative of the bunch, but she only answered to direct prompts from the others. Even Eri had more to say than she did during the trip. When they finally made it to the hospital, Akio parked in front of the building and told them, "I'll be back in an hour. If you have any problems, talk to a lady with black and green hair. The name she'll be using is Jitsuko. She's there to keep an eye on Hikari on the off chance that the villains find out who he is." "How do we know we can trust her?" Mina asked absently, preparing to step out in the cold. "Well, Eraserhead trusts me, and I should hope that I trust my sister." Akio grinned easily, surprising his words. "She's good at her job. She'll keep a low profile, help your friend stay safe while he's in there." "Thank you," Eri said as she made to step out of the vehicle, the others quickly following her. "No problem," Akio answered as he gave him a two-fingered mock salute. "Have fun with your visit." Once the last door had been shut, he drove away, leaving the 5 teenagers standing in front of the large building, each of them wondering just what would be waiting inside. Ochako was the first to stir, saying to the others, "Come on, it's cold out here. Todoroki says that the people inside are always helpful, and nothing crazy has happened to him since he's come here. It probably helps that the patients are all given daily quirk suppressants." Izuku mused aloud as his girlfriend took him by the hand and started leading the way inside. Even if someone were to become a handful, they wouldn't be able to use their powers while they caused trouble. "Everyone remember their cover names?" Mina mumbled just loud enough for the others to hear as they approached a set of glass doors. When everyone responded that they did, she nodded and moved to push open the entrance, allowing the others to go in ahead of her. It didn't take them long to be brought to Kurai's room by one of the people on staff who had been alerted to the fact that he would be having guests that day. "It's nice to see his family coming to visit him already," the orderly said in a warm tone. "Some of these poor people go years without so much as a letter from theirs." "We just want to make sure that he's settling in okay," Akadori said in response, all traces of humor gone from his face as he spoke. "Since our mom and dad aren't around anymore, Madara's all I've got left on my immediate family." Over his shoulder, he added, "Hiyori and Suga have been making an effort to keep in touch with us ever since the battle at Kamino, but I'm really glad that they'll be able to see Madara in person today." According to the faux backstory that Eraserhead and Dr. Kentaro had concocted, their parents had been among the people killed at Kamino Ward by All for One. Not that it was technically a lie, Akadori thought wryly. "Well, other than the bruises, he's doing just fine here in Itamori," the orderly said cheerfully, nearly missing the looks of alarm that passed between the 5 guests. "Is something the matter?" "Bruises?" Mina asked tightly. "No one said anything to us about bruises." "Oh," the orderly said, looking a little nonplussed as he paused before turning in a corner in the hallway. "Well, sorry, I thought you already knew about it." "What happened?" Eri asked, her sapphire eyes narrowing in concern and frustration. "Before being transferred here, Kayaba suffered some kind of night terror that triggered his quirk and caused him to strike himself in his sleep," the orderly explained with a slight wince as he gestured for them to follow his lead once more, the group falling into place with worry writ across their faces. "He'll fully recover, don't you worry. They healed most of the damage back at the other hospital, and now all he's got are some light bruises on his jaw that can heal on their own." Izuku and Eri exchanged a quick look between them, dread settling in their guts more than their friends. If One for All was reacting to Kurai's emotional instability in his sleep, things might be worse than they thought. "Ah, here we are," said the employee, gesturing to a room labeled with Kurai's fake name. "I'll just let him know that you're here." Following a rapid series of knocks, the man asked, "Kayaba, you decent in there?" "If you're here for my coloring materials, you can forget it," a familiar voice grumbled from within. "I'm not giving them back. The only thing I have for entertainment until I got it cleared to have a freaking book to read." The orderly smiled and gave the teenagers a wink before stepping away from the door, saying in a lowered voice, "Shout if you need anything." "Thanks," Eri replied as he departed, Akadori moving to open the door. Inside, Kurai was bent over his desk as he grumbled, "I don't need a quirk to remind you why taking my stuff is a poor idea, Asahi." "Pretty sure it's the hospital stuff," his brother replied while Ochako shut the door behind them, everyone having gathered into the room. It was a fairly nice place, if a bit smaller than their dorm rooms back on campus, and it lacked anything personal that would mark the area as Kurai's. "Fight me, these guys are... Good grief!" The boy's muttering was cut off as he turned around and nearly fell over backwards when he got a good look at his friends and brother. "Akadori? That's you?" "Oh, come on, I don't look that different." His brother chuckled as he slapped his brother's shoulder lightly before they embraced one another. "And remember, it's Taki while I'm in here. Get it together, man." He noticed that the hospital attendant had spoken truthfully about his brother's injury. There was some discoloration on the right side of his jaw, but the swelling seemed to have been reduced to a minimum, meaning that it would only be 2 or 3 days before the damage was completely erased. "That's the idea," the other boy said slowly, trying to work out what his eyes were now telling him in contrast with his preconceived expectations. "Eri?" "Hiyori," she answered with a slightly forced smile as she stepped forward to give him a brief hug. "It's good to see you, even under the current circumstances." "Yeah, you too," he said, looking a little dazed as Izuku and Ochako took their turns in greeting him, informing the boy that their cover names were Daigo and Suguha, respectively. "How are you holding up?" Mina asked as she made her way forward, having known that if she had taken the first greeting, she would have had to have been uninterrupted by the others, but now she could hold on to his undivided attention. Kurai's eyes nearly bugged out of his head at the sight of Mina's disguise, his jaw working up and down without so much as a peep coming from his damaged mouth as he worked to comprehend just how she had done such a thing. When he did finally speak, it was nothing intelligible either. Akudori struggled valiantly to hold in his laughter, but it was doomed to failure as he fell on the floor in a fit of giggling at his brother's supremely confused expression. "There it is!" he hooted between his cackles. "Ladies and gents, he's been bamboozled! Someone get a picture!" What do you think? Mina asked a little shyly as she waited for Kurai's thought process to restart itself. It's good, he finally managed to get out. It's just a lot. Yeah, Momo went all out with the aesthetics change, she said as she looked down at herself, still unused to the altered coloring of her skin. I mean, yeah, but where'd your horns go? Kurai asked, his tone still a bit dazed. His eyes kept flicking between his girlfriend and the others as their new appearances kept trying to sink into his brain, with limited success. I cut him off, she shrugged. Can't risk them giving me away. At that, Kurai visibly cringed, having been aware of Mina's childhood injury, as well as the fact that her horns were actually a little sensitive where they connected to her skull. But doesn't that... It's a small price to pay, she said with a flimsy smile that did nothing to reassure him. They'll grow back, eventually. Actually, I'll be rewinding all of us on our way back to UA, Eri informed them. It'll be just enough to undo the changes we underwent so we don't have to worry about using artificial methods to change ourselves back to normal in time for our work studies. See? Mina said, a bit of her normal cheer making its way back into her voice. Problem solved. Once Kurai had finally managed to shake off the sight of his friend's elaborate disguises, he composed himself and had them all take up positions in the room so that they formed a rough circle, with Mina sitting next to him on the bed and Izuku standing across from him against a wall. How is it in here? Ochako decided to ask when the atmosphere stalled with an awkward tension. Not bad. Food's better than I thought it would be, Kurai answered with a shrug. These socks with the rubber soles are pretty comfortable. I've already received an offer from a quote-unquote recovering drug addict to become a pimp after I get out of here, so I guess I'm making friends with the guy down the hall. Akudori didn't even try to contain his laughter this time, just managing to snort out the words, "That'd be the fastest career turnaround in history." Mina slugged the younger boy in the arm, causing him to let out a short yelp and shoot her an annoyed look while she made a rude gesture at him before turning back to Kurai and saying, "You told Mr. Aizawa that you wanted to see the five of us specifically, but not why." "Yeah, did the hospital tell you I got bitch slapped through a wall?" her boyfriend asked a little sourly. "They said you were sleepwalking or something." Izuku nodded, but with looking concerned for his friend. "I'm sorry that happened, but what does it have to do with us?" "I wasn't just sleepwalking," Kurai said, his features becoming even more severe as he stared at his hands, which were clenching each other as they trembled slightly. "I told Mina about this, but I guess you four should also know now that I've been seeing myself as Kai. That's what scared the hell out of me when you found me on Christmas night." He directed the last part to Izuku, whose eyes had grown wide at the news. "At first, I would just kind of see him in the corner of my eye or hear him at the edge of my rage, but then he started getting mouthy." "Surprise, surprise," Akudori muttered, though he looked just as grim as his brother at the news, so Mina decided to hold off on slapping him again. "He started off by telling me that we weren't done being a hero, and I tried to ignore him." Kurai sighed as he continued to stare at his shaking hands. "Eventually, he got under my skin, and when I mouthed off back to him, he got violent." "Wait, you're saying that your hallucination used your quirk against you?" Ochako asked, her eyes nearly as wide as Izuku's. "If that's true, you're not just seeing things as a result of PTSD," Akudori muttered as his face changed to one of deeper thought. "Your mind might be developing a case of dissociative identity disorder." "He's doing what now?" Mina asked, looking more worried than everyone else put together. "He might be developing a case of split personality due to all the trauma and conflicting ideas going on in his head," Eri said softly, tears beginning to pool in the corners of her eyes. "Kurai, I am so sorry." "Forgiven and forgotten," he said with a slight shake of his head, though he kept his gaze fixed on his now shaking hands even then. "The reason I called all of you here is because I need your help to choose the next wielder of One for All, and quickly. If my mind is actually starting to fragment itself, I need to get the power into the hands of someone who isn't at risk for a psychotic breakdown. If I'm not in control of myself, I could end up killing someone the next time I lose it." "But your mind, it's splitting itself into the one who doesn't want to be a hero anymore and Kai, who wants to keep using One for All to save people," Mina said slowly as she found herself putting an arm around Kurai's shoulders while using her other hand to caress his left arm gently. "Neither of those personalities want to hurt anyone, right?" "It's more than that, Mina," Akudori said, having already seen where his brother's thoughts were heading. Once the mind splits like that, there's a good chance that the personalities will continue to emerge from his subconscious, and the next one might not be so well-intentioned. There's also the chance that if he passes on the quirk, his dissociated identity will fade away, since it will no longer have the means to carry out its desires. So, you think this might help him to keep his mind together? Ochako asked Akururi, who nodded in tandem with his brother. It's a possibility, the younger boy nodded. One I don't think we can afford to ignore. Even if we're wrong, and it doesn't help his mind to heal itself, he's right about the fact that someone like him shouldn't be holding on to One for All. He's a ticking time bomb on a thermonuclear level. But what if we're looking at this all wrong? Izuku asked, his chin in his hand and his eyes narrowed with consideration. What do you mean? Eri asked him, even as Akururi's gaze also became narrowed. What if... Izuku hesitated, his eyes sweeping around the room before they settled back on Kurai as he said, what if the personality with us right now isn't the original Kurai? Those words rendered the room silent as a tomb, but the tension increased exponentially by the second. Fortunately, it was quickly broken by Eri saying, Deku, let him explain. The unexpected interruption came from Akururi, who ignored the furious glare from Mina and the stunned look from his brother. We're dealing with a major unknown, that being the proper psychological state of someone who's been resurrected. None of us know what's supposed to be happening right now, or how to properly recover from a traumatizing event like that. When Eri brought Kurai back to life, his emotions were running really, really high, Izuku said quickly, as if afraid that someone might interrupt him. Like you've all been saying, that had to be unimaginably stressful on his mind, right? What if in the process of his brain getting acclimated to his old body again, all those negative emotions buried down any sense of his old self? What if Kai is his old personality trying to take control of his body and is willing to use One for All to do it? Or maybe my old self is beyond sick and tired of all the fighting and horrors of being a hero and just can't handle it anymore. Kurai snarled, his eyes flashing as he stood up from his bed. I'm not like you, Izuku. I never have been. I asked you here to help me, not jump on the insanity bandwagon. Kurai, sit down, Akururi ordered as he moved to stand between the two other boys. We're trying to help you, and in order for them to do that, we need to analyze all possible causes of the problem. We already know the cause, Mina growled as she also shot to her feet. Stop trying to find new ones already. Just because the sum of the problems wasn't present at the initial diagnosis, it doesn't mean, kid, I will end you! Mina interrupted, drawing her hand back to slap Akururi again. There was a short burst of wind and lightning that ended with the normally pink girl slammed on the bed, Kurai lying on the ground, and Akururi in an arm lock that Eri was holding with a stony expression on her face. I didn't turn back the course of time to watch you guys do what the League has been trying to do from the beginning, she said flatly as Izuku and Ochako eyed the future girl apprehensively. Ashes Queen, I know that you're trying to help Kai, but hitting people who offer solutions you don't like is hardly an answer. Kai, by your own admission, your sanity is the one in question, so maybe you're not in the best position to say what's right or wrong about the workings of your mind at the moment. And as for you, she tightened her grip on Akururi's wrist, leading him to grunt with pain before she added, you have a long way to go before you hold a candle to the Akururi of my time. You don't have a viable solution and you know it, so stop acting like you do. With that, she let the other boy go so that he could massage his aching wrist while he backed into a corner while glaring at the now stone-faced girl. Eri, Kurai asked us here to help him pick a new candidate for our quirk, she said to cut Ochako off. Let's spend our time doing that before we try to pile more problems on his shoulders. He's got more than enough to deal with right now. Can we agree on that? With some reluctance, the others in the room gave assent to the idea, leading her to nod and say, thank you. Kurai, did you have anyone in mind to receive the quirk? Yeah, he grunted as he sat up with a sullen look and leaned against his new bed on the floor, neglecting to rise as he did. Togata seems like a prime choice. Izuku thought about giving it to him in the past. He's got the right attitude. There's also the fact that he has the right body type for it, so he shouldn't have too hard of a time adjusting to its use. Problem with that if you're trying to get rid of the quirk quickly, Akururi muttered, frowning as his wrist continued to throb. He's waiting on little Eri to get good enough to rewind him to when he had permeation. If you give them the power now, she might erase One for All entirely when she tries to restore his original quirk. Kurai scowled, though not necessarily at his brother this time. Good point, he muttered. All right, next on the list, Todoroki. The others all looked at one another as they considered this possibility. Eri had to reflect in that moment that the Akururi she had known in the future had a frighteningly good idea how his brother's mind worked, seeing as they were following his thought patterns almost exactly. Still, the memory of the meeting that had happened only weeks ago in the distant future led to her asking, Not Ingenium? Kurai raised an eyebrow as he looked at her up and down before he asked, Any particular reason why it should be him? When she hesitated, he softened his gaze a little bit and said, I'm not asking to bait you. I actually want to know why you think he'd be a good choice for the quirk. He's a good hero, and he might physically be a better fit than Freezerburn, she pointed out. His training already works for his body pretty hard, so he'd be able to acclimate to the power a lot quicker than Todoroki could. The first time she had mentioned the heterochromic hero, she had automatically used the name she had used for him growing up, only to realize he had yet to come up with that name in this time period. But could he handle the pressure? Akurui countered, doing his best to ignore the curiosity that had been aroused by what was apparently going to become Todoroki's hero name. They had more pressing concerns at the moment, personal interests be damned. He already takes a lot onto himself that he doesn't technically have to, like someone else we used to know. He gave Kurai a meaningful look as he said this. We hardly need another one of me running around, his brother admitted as he went back to staring at his hands. Todoroki would probably be a better pick in that case. He's always kept his cool, even when things were looking pretty damn impossible. Even if it takes him a little longer to develop the right muscle mass needed, which honestly won't take him that long given how fit he already is, I think he could handle the responsibilities that come with it. Aren't you guys forgetting something? Ochako volunteered timidly. When everyone looked over at her, she asked, What about the previous holders of One for All? Didn't Eri say that they won't accept just anybody as a new host? Don't you have to get their opinion on this? Oh, right. Kurai said dumbly, a look of disbelief on his face as he registered something that should have been obvious from the beginning. Even Akurui seemed disappointed at himself because he was smacking his forehead repeatedly with his palm as he muttered under his breath, Idiot, you always missed something! Let's try contacting them now, Eri said to Kurai as she sat down on the floor with her legs tucked under her. They haven't been very talkative ever since I found you guys, but I've found that I can still see them in my dreams every now and again. I'll bet that if we meditate, we'll be able to talk with them. No dice, Kurai replied, causing the other One for All holder to frown up at him. Sorry, but I can't use my quirk right now. Kurai, if you want to get rid of it, you're going to have to... No, I mean, I physically can't use it right now, he interrupted Izuku while holding up his hand toward his friend. The hospital has me on quirk suppressants, remember? If I could, I'd use it this once if it had helped get rid of it, but I can't. He shrugged helplessly, and Izuku felt a little bad for the accusatory tone he had been about to take. Okay, good point, Eri murmured as she closed her eyes. I'll just talk to them myself. Maybe I should try too, Izuku said as he knelt from across the girl, surprising the others a little bit. Seeing this, he explained, When Eri and I first came into contact, I could feel One for All itself, and the presence of the other wielders inside of her. It's how I recognized who she is. Maybe I still have enough of a connection that I'll be able to talk to the past wielders too. It's a good idea, Akurui nodded approvingly. Hopefully the other vestiges aren't too pissed at him. Here's to hoping, Eri nodded before lowering her chin and beginning to take a deep, even breath as she tried to quiet her mind. Likewise, Izuku closed his eyes and started measuring his breathing like Kurai had taught him to when he was first learning to control One for All at a lower percentage. After another somewhat awkward pause of silence, Mina stirred and asked, What do we do while we're waiting? If you were to ever go in disguise, I never would have picked you for a blonde. Kurai said almost instantly. Are you just still stuck on that? She couldn't help but laugh a little. Blonde, he repeated insistently. It's so normal. Don't mind him. He's probably just getting flashbacks. Akurui snickered as he leaned against the desk in the room. Flashbacks of what? First girl I had a crush on in grade school? Akurui, Kurai said in her warning tone. Wait, she was blonde? Mina asked, her mouth refusing to remain in a neutral position. You never mentioned that. Kurai glared at his brother before he muttered, You planned this. Excuse me? You planned this. I know you did. You honestly don't trust me? Akurui asked with an innocent air about him. Your brother was the one who said it'd be best if she looked like someone from pre-quirk times, Ochako said as her gaze turned toward the younger Hikari, who was grinning unashamedly. You will believe how easy that sell was, he snickered. One mention of a blonde Kardashian. She just went for it. Akurui! Can't you guys let us just meditate in peace? Izuku suddenly snapped, startling the others. Sorry, they all apologized instantly. It's all right, Eri said with a sigh as she opened her eyes. They're not answering for whatever reason. Wait, what? Akurui asked with a frown, becoming all business again. You could tell that fast? We weren't being too noisy? Ochako asked her. I once meditated in the middle of a mall on my way to UA, and I could hear them without any trouble, Eri said with a shake of her head. In the future, Akurui taught me a lot of meditation techniques to help me master my quirk, so I'd like to think that I'm pretty good at it. So our concentration isn't the issue, Izuku grunted as he got to his feet. Maybe the vestiges already know what we're going to talk to them about and they don't care? Doesn't sound like them based on what you two have told us, Akudori muttered. I'd ask if you were having trouble using the power, but my aching wrist already answers that. Don't be a baby, at least she let you stay on your feet, Kurai grumbled. If the vestiges are going to stay quiet on the matter, let's get back to trying to figure out who should be the next holder, Izuku said, trying to keep the conversation moving in a more productive direction. They'd dealt with enough sidetracks for the day, he thought. Pending Todoroki's acceptance, it seems like he's the best choice for the quirk. Good thing we can still agree on some things, right? Kurai snorted softly, though Izuku failed to return the sentiment. Seeing that his friend was still determined to be sore at him, the hospitalized boy shrugged and said, Guess we'll have to bring him in for the next visit so we can discuss it. Why don't we just call him over the phone? Mina suggested. Because I'm not allowed to have a phone yet, Kurai answered, his eyes glazing over slightly as he did. Besides which, this seems like the kind of conversation we ought to have in person. How long until you get a phone? Izuku asked, his expression changing to one of slight concern for the other boy. Depends on when my doctor thinks that I'm okay to interact with the outside world on a more regular basis, Kurai shrugged again. Might be sometime this week, might not be for months. Some people have gone years without them, apparently. So, does that mean, what, we have to write letters if we want to talk to you? Ochako asked. Like Todoroki does with his mom? I'm allowed to use a phone that they have in the recreational room once every other day, but I only get it for 15 minutes, and it's not exactly a private place, Kurai answered. Rapping on the floorboards, he then added, Luckily the walls and floor in here are pretty sound absorbent. Helps to keep people from eavesdropping on conversations between patients and doctors, but if someone starts yelling, the noise can still get through. Not a bad setup for talks like this one, then, Akudori said with something like approval in his voice. What if Todoroki says no? Eri asked, a small furrow in her brow as she caught herself slipping on the name again. I can't imagine that he would, seeing as he's one of the people who first respected your decision to stop being a hero. But he's pretty stubborn when it comes to his sense of purpose and ideals. If, for whatever reason, he decides that he can't accept One for All, what then? Then Akudori better be ready for one hell of a workout regime. Kurai deadpanned. This response almost sent his brother into another fit of giggles, but the laughter died in his throat when he saw that Kurai was dead serious. Are you out of your mind? He sputtered once he realized this. I am the last person who should get that kind of power. Pretty sure that spot belongs to me, Kurai replied, but Akudori was already shaking his head rapidly in the negative. No way, not happening. Why not? Why not? Akudori spat back, his eyes wide with disbelief. Why not? Why in the hell would you ever think that was a good idea other than nepotism? We were raised with the same morals and ideals, Kurai tossed back. Shouldn't that be reason enough for me to trust you with it? Besides, with One for All enhancing solar intelligence, you'd probably be able to figure out how to defeat the League and their hidden allies in like an hour. Your body may not be ready to handle the physical aspect of the power, but it'd guarantee to make you the smartest person on the planet in the interim. That's exactly why I can't take it, idiot. Akudori scowled, his refusal continuing to surprise the others in the room as they could only look on in confusion. Think about it. I've always been the smartest person in the room, sans my encounters with Professor Shield and Principal Nezu. You know how that affects my disposition toward other people. Can you imagine what would happen if I gained the power to surpass all the intellect of the history's greatest minds combined? And the physical might to enforce my will if it should contradict with something I perceive as stupid? I'd become a worse tyrant than Shigaraki did in the future. That's an over-exaggeration. Kurai started to protest, but Eri held up a hand for him to be quiet. It's not, and you know it, Akudori said heavily. I'd start off with good intentions, of course. I'd defeat the League and set about crushing the last of organized crime in Japan. But what happens when I don't like something that some hero did along the way because it didn't line up with my idea of a good hero? Do I punish him for doing wrong, as would be my moral obligation, or do I just turn a blind eye? Answer, it doesn't matter. No one could stop me if I decided something was right or wrong and decided to act to enforce that ideal. Before Kurai could say anything to counter, Mina leaned over and said in a low tone, In case you're wondering, yes, this is what it's like to argue with you. How do you put up with me? He grumbled, causing her to chuckle and bump his shoulder with her own. So we're clear on that, Izuku asked, looking a little exasperated. Todoroki's the next user as long as he agrees to it? Yep, Akudori said quickly. I don't see why not. Eri nodded calmly. He seems like a good choice, Ochako agreed, seemingly relieved that they were starting to find some common ground. He's got my vote, Mina added. Kurai gave a slow nod of his own before he said, All right. I know you guys have to go to your work-study agencies for the week after New Year's, so I'll have to make my transfer before that. I'll have to make the transfer after that. I'll leave it to you guys to bring the subject up to him. If he says no, I'll start thinking of somebody else to take the power. Probably Togata, even if I have to have you guys sneak one of my hairs into a sandwich. Not going to start on another contingency plan already, Kurai smirked. That doesn't seem like you. I've had enough arguing for the day, and my brain has been abusing itself more than enough without me putting extra thoughts into stuff right now, his brother grumbled. Seeing the tired look on his face in that moment, Mina felt that it might be time for something more uplifting for him than the business of who would succeed him as the next wielder of One for All. Guys, can you give Kurai and me some time alone? She asked. I need to talk to him in private. Is everything okay? Izuku asked a little worriedly. It was so strange, Mina thought, how one moment he looked like he wanted to punch Kurai's lights out, and the next he was getting ready to jump to his friend's aid without a second thought. I don't get boys, she thought while she put a reassuring smile on her face. Yeah, everything's fine, she told him. Don't worry, we'll only take 15 minutes or so, and if I hear anything sounding like a joke coming out of you, Aki, you'd better kiss your limited edition signed All Might poster goodbye. The younger boy, who had been grinning and about to open his mouth, quickly flinched as if he had been stung and muttered, Kurai, you traitor. How could you sell me out like that? Didn't seem fair to have me as the only person she knows how to comfortably threaten. Kurai snorted softly, a little bit of amusement working into his eyes as he did. Welcome to my world, brother. Once the others were gone, Mina sat next to him on the bed while he just stared at the wall with a blank expression on his face, as if in a trance. Tilting her head at him, she said, I gotta admit, it's a pretty fascinating wall. How could I possibly compare? She said it with a slightly teasing tone, hoping to get him to smile a little bit. It didn't, but he did turn toward her and maintain direct eye contact for the first time since they had come into his room. Don't say that, even as a joke, he murmured quietly. Sorry if I'm being absent. It's just a lot to think about all at once, but I am glad to see you. I know, and I'm sorry I didn't tell you, and I'm sorry I didn't have you told that we were going to be coming in disguise, she apologized. It seemed like a good opportunity for a prank, but now I see that was pretty stupid. No, it's very you, Kurai said as he closed his eyes and leaned his head forward to rest his brow against hers. Don't ever stop being you, not for anything or anyone. Have you seen your, Kai since the other hospital? She asked as she laid her left arm across his back while supporting her other hand on his leg out of habit. She reflected briefly that they were supposed to be keeping stricter personal boundary space, but decided that they could both do with this small bit of comfort while they had the opportunity. Strangely, no, which is honestly starting to freak me out the more the longer he goes without showing up. Kurai sighed, and now it clicked for me in a why he looked especially exhausted. I feel like he's going to jump out of the mirror every time I go to the bathroom, but so far, nothing. The doctors haven't diagnosed me or given me any mood stabilizers yet, so I know I'm not cured or whatever. I almost wish he would show up again just to stop keeping me in suspense, which is counterintuitive, but what do I know anymore? He let out a hoarse little chuckle before his shoulders started to shake as the laughter turned into tears, and Mina found herself holding him tightly to her chest while she kissed his head as gently as she could. Sorry, he gasped. I don't know how I'm supposed to handle losing my mind, and I'm just unloading everything unfairly onto you. I'll try to... It's not unfair when I offered to help with your burdens, she said to cut him off softly. Neither of us could have ever imagined that we'd have to deal with stuff this heavy, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm not going anywhere. I'll make this up to you, he said into her shirt. Somehow. I don't know how, but when I get out of here, I will make up for all the trouble I've ever caused you. She smiled past the tears stinging her own eyes as she said, Just make it back to me and I'll call it even. When he started to pull back, she tilted his head so that he would be looking right at her again as she said, That's all I've ever wanted, Kurai. I just want you to come home to me. I will, he promised as they pressed their brows together once again. I'll get better, and I'll make my way home to you. In that one moment, Mina was able to feel her heart lighten just a little, as she heard sparks resembling the fire of Kai's voice coming from Kurai's mouth again. It wasn't for long, and it wasn't a resounding declaration that he was aiming at the world, but for her, for now, it was enough.
In the shadows I've grown, in my struggles I've shown, I'll never back down for anyone. You think that this is the end, I've just begun. Through my life I've been gentle,
I don't know. What do you want to start with?
Well, transformations are fun. Also
Yeah.
depressing. It explains why Mina is so tired in the
Yeah.
picture, aside from just being hella stressed.
Yep.
Poor thing. Oh my gosh. My heart. Like
Like
what
you
the
see
heck?
some, if you look closely, you can see some lines under Akadori's eyes as well.
Yeah.
Like not as much. Like
Well, all of them look
Yeah.
pretty stressed and
Yeah.
tired and worn
That was the
out,
idea.
So, oh man.
I don't know. Did anything in particular stand out to you about the chapter?
I definitely enjoyed Akurui's very Gandalf moment.
Which one?
Because, well, see, you know, it just makes me think of Frodo trying to give Gandalf the ring. He says, "You take it."
Oh, okay.
He's like, "No."
Don't tempt me, Frodo.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
that's
all right.
that's what happened with the quirk.
Honestly,
essentially,
I didn't even think about that. that did not cross my mind in
that
any
is
capacity
exactly
while
what
I was
I
writing
thought
this.
when I heard it. I was like,
That's funny. Yeah. No, that did not cross my mind at all.
nice.
Like, but cool. Yeah, no, it was like I just thought of reasons why I was like, people had mentioned earlier on, like a few months back, like they're like, oh, will Akadori would be the new main character, and I kind of thought about like, okay, yeah, within the story there is room for Akadori to become the new hero, but why would he? I was presented with the question: would he take One for All if he had the opportunity? And, you know, after pulling a Paolini and talking to the character for a minute, I was like, nah, he wouldn't take it. Like, not at all. I remember Christopher Paolini saying in, I don't remember if it was an interview or I don't remember if it was like a spoken interview or if it was something that was written down like in an article, but he had said that, so spoilers for the Inheritance Cycle if you haven't read that. Originally, the story was supposed to end with Roran becoming the king of Alagasia. But as the story went on and he was getting ready to write the final book, he had a talk with each of the characters to figure out what they wanted out of life. And he realized that Roran would have made a good king, but he would have been miserable. So he didn't want to do that to him because he was like, if anybody deserves a happy ending out of all this mess, it's Roran.
Yeah.
So he went ahead, so he made him the Earl of Palancar Valley, which is still a pretty good responsibility, but it wasn't anything more than what he had already he had already set out to do. He set out to protect Katrina, and now that he had done that, his next interest was looking after the people of Palancar Valley. So he got that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a similar process when considering like what would it look like if Akadori got One for All, and I realized like. And he had to realize, being the smartest person around, he would turn into a tyrant.
Yeah.
Like, I don't say that to mean like I'm the smartest person around. I mean like so my knowledge of this world is all that encompasses it, right? So Akadori is like the closest thing to that. Like he doesn't have meta knowledge. Like he's not going to break the fourth wall, but he possesses.
He knows himself well enough.
He knows himself well enough, and he knows the factors well enough to know that just wouldn't end well for him. Of course, what none of these guys know is that you can pass One for All onto somebody who does have a secondary quirk, but it'll kill them in the long run. They don't know that yet. They think that they know that Kurai's body underwent a huge amount of stress, and that the two quirks combined within him was a contributing factor to that. But at this point in time, all they think is that all the injuries and stuff he just sustained, that would have killed him on its own. But if he'd had Energon and One for All together for any length of time, I'm going to say that he probably wouldn't have lasted a few months.
Yeah.
Because both quirks were just too powerful to interact with each other like that. It would have destroyed him from the inside out, even faster than the other wielders of One for All. But yeah, I had a little bit of fun with Eri kind of observing stuff, and she takes that moment to realize like, wow, Akadori really did know his brother, because the way the conversation goes, they're listing the candidates almost exactly the same way that Akadori said Kurai would have listed them.
Yeah. No, that part's cool. I think for me, I was more surprised that because when we were talking in the reviews, you said you based this on your experience, and so I was expecting it to be a lot darker than it was. It was actually like a kind of a pleasant visit, to be honest. I mean, yeah, it was tense, and there were some moments that were weird and awkward. But
how do I put? So when I was put in a mental ward, the times I felt most relaxed were when my parents came to visit me, and that's what we see. Like obviously his parents aren't coming to visit him, but this is the closest.
His loved ones are there.
His loved ones are there. You know, this is a support group. They're the people they're the ones that are trying to help him more than almost anybody.
So he's at.
So he's at. I wouldn't say he's at peace. Like we definitely.
I didn't say peace. Ease.
Ease. Okay. I don't know that we could say that either. Like if you're paying attention, he's still shaking. He's he's having trouble remaining present if he doesn't have something to talk about. But I would how do I put this? Like my experience of the hospital that I was in is kind of put into play here because him not being able to, him only being able to make calls every other day, in the common space, that was a thing. I wasn't allowed to have a phone while I was in the mental institute. I could only call people every other day, and I got 10 minutes or 15 minutes. A restriction that I had that they don't in this story is that I was only allowed to call family members. I wasn't allowed to call friends or anybody. Yeah. So it's not as strict as all that. Also, I did not have my own room when I was there. So the bit with the pimp trying to recruit him. Yeah, that was a thing. That was a thing that happened to me. That was a thing that happened to me. That was 110% a thing that happened to me.
My God.
I was coming up with the bit, and I was just like, "This is too good. There's no way I can't not use this."
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Well, I'm glad that you're able to use one of the funnier anecdotes from it.
It really when it happened, I was just like, "Get away from me!" But in hindsight, it was hilarious.
Yeah, that's so funny. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So the mental aspect of my personal experience, that's gonna come about more in the next few chapters, which are going to be pretty interesting, I think. Do you remember what the next 3 chapters are about that I'm planning?
Not at all.
I'm going to do the same events over the course of January, but it's going to be from 3 different points of view.
That's right.
You remember that?
Okay. Yeah.
First, we're going to do... Let's see. It's going to be 3 points of view. First, we're going to do... Akaduri. We're going to do a chapter on Akaduri. And for those of you who are hoping for Akaduri working with Hatsume, get ready for a grand old time.
All right.
Then after that, I'm going to do... Let's see. I haven't decided if I'm going to do Mina or Eri second or third, but it's going to be one of those two following. But yeah. I'm looking forward to the next few chapters. I kind of did something like this when during the period where Kurai was dead. I kind of took a look at what was happening to Kurai's family, and then a look at what was happening to the world at large, or the people that Kurai had affected, and it was roughly within the same time period. But in this, it's all going to be in the exact same amount of time, and throughout it, we're not going to get a chapter about Kurai. But we're going to have pieces of what's happening to him scattered throughout these next chapters. Okay. So that, so instead of having... The
mundane of being in the hospital is not going to... the time goes by, so it's broken up.
I definitely could have made a 4th chapter, but I felt like at that point it would be too repetitive. And this way, even though there are events that are being repeated from different points of view, I'm hoping readers still have something extra to look forward to in the sense that there's a 4th narrative woven into these. Because a 4th chapter just at that point, while I think I could do it, it just feels like it'd be redundant to that point.
No. Yeah, that works. Cool. I'm looking forward to reliving these as you polish them, because I know they weren't totally edited last time you showed them to me. So
it's gonna be fun.
Yay! All right. Well, I think that's about all I have.
Is that all we got? Yeah.
I also can't stop yawning, so I need to it's not out of boredom of the conversation. I'm just legitimately tired because
it's all good.
Last day of summer school, and it's freaking hot in our town. So
it's been way too hot.
Over 100 every day. I'm done. I'm over it.
We had cloud cover today, at least.
That was nice.
Alrighty, guys. Well, as always, we hope you have a plus ultra couple of weeks, and we'll see you for the next one.
Yeah.